Males and females have a difference in their chromosomes, thus genetic differences such as the SRY gene on the Y chromosome being present only in males. Males and females vary in the hormones that their bodies are exposed to. They vary in the receptors for these hormones, many of which are made in the brain because the brain is a target tissue for hormones like estrogen and testosterone. As a result, there are regions of the brain which vary between males and females. These are small variations, but variations nonetheless. There can be variations noticed in brain functionality and even in the disorders of the brain that each gender is more susceptible to. So the question can be asked, and has been asked, if there are slight variations in brain according to gender, how would, say, a homosexual male compare with a heterosexual male, a homosexual female to a heterosexual female, or a trans individual? Would they have a brain region more typical of the gender that was identified at birth, or the gender they identify with later in life? As you might guess, the answer to this question is that the topic needs more study. We often find this with questions which are human specific, thus experiments with lab animals are of minimal use. In many experiments, the number of subjects might be low, say who volunteer to have MRIs done and identify their gender identity in a specific category. If you were doing a post-mortem analysis of a brain, you would be limited to the brain samples that you would have access to. And so you might, base your conclusion on just a few brains. This being said, there are a number of reports which have identified differences between, say, the brain of an individual who identifies as heterosexual versus homosexual, or an individual who identifies as trans, compared to those who do not. It would not be clear if there are brain differences, what would necessarily be the cause. Would it be differences in the alleles of certain genes expressed? Would it be different levels of hormones? Would it be experiences in life? But nevertheless, the data that exists suggests that there can be differences between brains of individuals based on gender identity. I would like to add just a thought on the analysis of experimental data. We know that even if two people share the trait of, say, having heart disease, or breast cancer, or asthma, or diabetes, or whatever, that doesn't necessarily mean they have the same cause. Each of them could have the same trait that's caused by different genes, and perhaps then have different diagnoses medically with different treatments, etc. So there can be different causes of the same trait. In this case, we know that this is true in mice, for example, where if you wanted to increase the interest that a male mouse would display for other male mice and the odors of male mice, one could expose that mouse to more androgen hormone than is typical, or deny them androgen hormone. So in that sense of, say, interaction with other males sexually, you could get male mice to interact more with other males through two completely different routes, more androgen and less androgen. When we consider the causes of variations in genitalia, say cases of ambiguous genitalia, it becomes apparent that there are multiple causes, both for those who are chromosomally XY and display ambiguous genitalia, and those who are chromosomally XX. If a similar scenario applied to gender identity, that say being heterosexual or homosexual could be caused by multiple different factors, this would be a problem for experimental design. If you were saying comparing the brain of, I'm just going to make up an example, this is totally fictitious, of say a homosexual man to a heterosexual man. If there are different types of homosexual men, then if you were trying to conclude whether this variation in brain morphology is associated with homosexuality, it would be hard for you to get conclusive results. It might be true, but it might only be true of, say, a subset of gay men. And if you don't then split your pool, which might be rather small, of brains that you were analyzing, then you might come up with the idea that there are no significant differences because you're getting inconsistent results. If someone publishes a paper, someone else might have difficulty in replicating that study. Once again, if there were multiple causes of variations in attraction or gender identity. And so there is no firm conclusion based on the experimental data so far. And this area is understandably difficult to research. And so it will take continued research. But the evidence to date certainly suggests that, at least in some cases, there seem to be variations in brain morphology associated with differences in attraction and gender identity.